It felt like a championship broadcast rising from the first frame of the night with the weight and tension of a Super Bowl preview, where every moment carries the power to redefine a season. And the Denver Broncos entered this stage with a reputation for surviving chaos, for bending, but never breaking, and for winning games by the thinnest margin possible. This time, however, the conversation around their ninth straight win did not revolve only around grit, heart, or resilience. Instead, it took on the tone of a national debate as the entire league watched a series of officiating decisions tilt the field in ways that left fans, players, coaches, and analysts struggling to understand what had just unfolded. The Broncos walked away from Washington with a 27-26 overtime victory, a triumph that kept their record at 10-2 and pushed their winning streak to heights the franchise had not reached in more than a decade. Yet underneath that victory was a string of moments at the end of regulation and in overtime where fortune and judgment collided in ways that felt almost unreal. Such moments are the kind that shape narratives that last seasons, the kind that linger over playoff races, and the kind that ignite discussions from film rooms to bar counters across America. The pivotal sequence began late in the fourth quarter as Marcus Mariota scrambled for what initially seemed to be a gain of 7 yards on 2nd and 9 from his own 37-yard line. When expedited review came in, it revealed a much more complicated reality, showing that Mariota had actually been tripped nearly 20 yards earlier by Denver edge rusher Dondria Tillman. NBC Rules analyst Terry McAulay responded instantly and confidently, calling it tripping and stating that it should have resulted in a 15-yard penalty going against the Broncos. However, replay cannot manufacture a penalty out of thin air when the officials do not throw a flag on the field, which meant Washington was pushed back into a brutal 3rd and 21 situation and forced to punt after Alex Singleton broke up a deep pass that would have moved the chains and completely changed the final minutes of regulation. Yet that was only the beginning of a stretch that left even the broadcast booth stunned. Only minutes later, Washington's star receiver Terry McLaurin was contacted early by Patrick Surtain, the reigning defensive player of the year, who wrapped his arm around McLaurin before the ball arrived, creating what looked like a textbook case of pass interference. Instead, no call was made, no pause in the game, no commentary from the officials, leaving the Commanders and their fans with disbelief simmering beneath the surface. Moments after that moment of silence came a moment of confusion when McLaurin was flagged for a false start that simply did not match what viewers saw on replay. Mike Tirico reacted with confusion, and Chris Collinsworth challenged the validity of the call, both expressing that the wide receiver had been fully set and that the penalty held no grounding in the situation unfolding on screen. The drive continued to unravel when Mariota was flagged for intentional grounding on a ball thrown directly over the head of McLaurin, who was clearly outside the numbers. McAulay returned again with disbelief, stating that by rule the play was not grounding and that the call should never have been made. Even so, Washington pushed forward Mariota, driving his offense with urgency, connecting with Zach Ertz on a critical 4th down and then finding Deebo Samuel for the significant gains that positioned Jake Moody for a tying field goal as time expired, sending the game into overtime and giving Washington a temporary sense of control after weathering a hurricane of controversial decisions. Overtime became a psychological battle before a physical one. Washington won the coin toss and made the uncommon decision to kick rather than receive, a choice that has become more common under the new overtime rules, but a choice that still carries enormous strategic weight, especially considering Denver's defense had just exhausted itself over an 18-play drive with little rest from an offense that had gone cold late in regulation. As Bo Nix stepped onto the field with fresh legs and a sideline full of defenders finally catching their breath, he immediately struck hard, launching a pass to Evan Engram for a 41-yard gain that placed Denver in prime scoring position and soon allowed R.J. Harvey to punch in the touchdown that put the Broncos ahead. Mariota responded with determination, moving down the field and getting into the end zone. Once more, the entire stadium tightened as the Commanders lined up for the two-point attempt, a single play for the win, a single moment with the season hanging in the balance. Denver brought pressure, unblocked edge rusher Nick Benito exploding off the edge and knocking down the pass intended for Jeremy McNichols, who was standing wide open in the flat. Benito secured the final breath of the Broncos' 9th straight comeback win, turning a night filled with chaos into a moment of triumph that spoke to the resilience of their roster. Even as the officiating narrative shadowed the victory after the game, Benito spoke with confidence, saying that the team had been tested so often throughout the season that nothing felt new to them and that they We're prepared for any situation. The Broncos insist that luck has played no part in their success, that their win streak reflects discipline, toughness, and a belief that no deficit is too large. However, the events of Sunday night continue to spark discussions throughout the football world. Discussions about human judgment, competitive fairness, momentum swings, and the thin line that separates victory from defeat in the National Football League. This was not just a win for Denver. It was a night that will be revisited, replayed, and argued for weeks to come. A night that captured the drama, intensity, and unpredictability that define the sport at its highest level, and a night that challenges fans to reflect on the role of officiating in shaping outcomes that matter deeply to players, coaches, and communities. Join the conversation. Share your perspective and follow the channel for more deep dive analysis crafted for fans who live and breathe the game.